Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
It was the kind of birthday brunch that looked picture perfect from the outside, sunlight slanting across the table just right, glinting off polished forks and mimosa glasses, soft jazz in the background, and the faint clinking of cutlery against plates. You'd think it was a Hallmark moment, maybe even worth a Facebook post if you didn't know any better. But if you looked a little closer, if you paid attention to the way Melanie's lips were just a bit too tight around her smile or how Mom kept glancing nervously between us, you'd know this wasn't just brunch. It was the opening act of a slow-motion implosion. I sat at the far end of the table, a plate of banana pancakes in front of me, already going cold. My nephew Liam was playing a game on his tablet with the volume turned all the way up, ignoring everyone like he always did. My brother-in-law Brian, Melanie's long-suffering husband, was scrolling his phone under the table, probably checking golf scores or texting his mistress. Just kidding, but honestly, who knows anymore? My mom was talking about a new church group she joined, using that fake upbeat voice she reserves for pretending everything's fine. And then there was Melanie, my sister, my oldest adversary, the queen of backhanded compliments, sitting across from me in her beige blazer like she was there for a job interview instead of a family brunch. She was already 2 mimosas deep, which meant she was teetering on the edge of either confession or combustion. You could always tell when she was about to pop off. Her left eye twitched, her jaw flexed, and she'd start saying things that sounded nice until you really thought about them. Like earlier, when she leaned in and said, "You're looking healthy, Eric, finally getting some sleep?" Which, coming from Melanie, was basically her way of saying I used to look like shit. I smiled, nodded, and said thank you, though we both knew I wasn't thanking her for the comment. I was thanking her for confirming that, yes, nothing had changed. It's always been like this with us. Ever since we were kids, Melanie's been the star and I've been the cautionary tale. She got straight A's, I got lectures. She joined the debate team, I joined a garage band and dropped out after 2 weeks. She got accepted into Northwestern, I got caught shoplifting cigarettes from a gas station. She married a dentist with a boat and a Tesla. I got divorced in my 30s and run a comic book store that barely breaks even. She's Mom's pride. I'm the quiet disappointment. So sitting there, listening to her talk about her new listing in some fancy neighborhood, something about a 4-bedroom colonial with a renovated kitchen, I just let my mind wander. I thought about how different we'd turned out and how inevitable it all felt, like we were 2 trains running on parallel tracks, one headed toward the city skyline, the other into the woods where nobody gave a damn. I didn't speak much that day. I listened. And I waited. Because I could feel it coming, that inevitable moment where Melanie would break character and let the poison spill. And sure enough, it didn't take long. Mom had just asked me about the store, how business was going, if I was still doing those little comic conventions, as she calls them. I said yeah, things were steady. Before I could elaborate, Melanie cut in with a scoff so loud it could have shattered glass. "Steady," she said, like the word offended her. Is that what we're calling it now? A grown man, still selling comic books like it's a lemonade stand. Everyone froze. Even Liam looked up from his game for a second. Brian pretended to get a text. Mom opened her mouth, then shut it again. And me? I didn't say a word. I looked right at her, took a slow sip of my coffee, and smiled. She wasn't done. Of course she wasn't. Melanie never just grazes the surface, she dives straight into the nerve. You know what? It's sad, Eric. Honestly. You're 43. You live alone in a rented apartment. You've got no kids, no career, no savings. Mom's going to die one day, and then what? You think a couple of comic nerds are going to show up and take care of you. She laughed, like she'd just said something hilarious instead of cruel. And then she said it. The sentence I'd heard versions of my whole life, but never so bluntly, never so naked and mean. You'll always be the failure of this family. Silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Not even the waiter, who had just approached the table with a tray of fresh drinks, turned on his heel and walked away. The air thickened. My heart didn't race, though. It didn't drop. It just stilled. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to see for decades. Melanie wasn't some untouchable titan who'd won the family lottery. She was bitter. Tired. Angry in the way only someone with everything to lose can be. I could have said something. I could have called her out, right there, in front of everyone. I could have reminded her of her college affair. Or that time she locked me in the garage when I was 10 and told me I'd never matter to anyone. But I didn't. I took another sip of coffee. Then I smiled again. The moment passed. Mom changed the subject. Brian offered me a ride home. Melanie acted like nothing had happened. But something had. I didn't speak a word that day. But last night, I began writing the first draft of something I should have done years ago. Memory is a strange, unreliable thing. It doesn't move in straight lines or clean timelines. It comes back in slices and smells and flickers, like burnt film reels running through a projector that's older than your regrets. I didn't start remembering the real shit until after the brunch. Not the surface stuff. Not the words. I'm talking about the things you bury so deep you forget you were ever carrying them. It's funny how one sentence from your sister can dig up an entire damn childhood you thought you'd paved over with sarcasm and adulthood. I think the first time Melanie betrayed me, I was maybe 6 years old. We were in the kitchen, bored and sneaky, and she convinced me to steal Oreos from the top shelf of the pantry. She stacked a stool on top of a kitchen chair and made me climb it because, quote, "You're the better climber, Eric." I got the damn cookies, we both ate them behind the couch, and when Mom found the crumbs, Melanie didn't blink. She looked Mom straight in the eyes and said, "Eric took them." I told him not to, but he never listens. That was the first betrayal. Just a little one. A small death. They add up. By the time I was 11, Melanie had figured out the exact formula for getting me in trouble and getting herself a pat on the back. She didn't even need to lie big. She just needed to raise an eyebrow, twist a truth, stay quiet at the right time. Like when I accidentally broke Dad's stupid ceramic eagle statue, and she told him I was swinging a bat in the house. I wasn't. I tripped while vacuuming. But guess who got grounded for a week? Guess who got $20 for being honest? Yeah, high school was a minefield. You think kids are cruel? Try having a sister who feeds your shame to them on a silver platter. Melanie once told her entire friend group that I wet the bed until 8th grade. Which, for the record, was a lie. I stopped at 10. Thank you very much, but the damage was done. I was P-boy for an entire semester. Then there was the time she found my notebook full of dumb lyrics and poems, stuff I wrote when I still thought I might be something, and she read them aloud during a sleepover with her friends. Said she thought they were deep. They laughed for 15 minutes straight. I heard it from the hallway. I started avoiding home whenever I could. Started hanging out with kids who had worse problems than I did, just so I could feel like mine didn't count. That's how I ended up in rehab the first time. 18 years old, barely made it through senior year, and already familiar with the smell of cheap vodka and stale cigarettes. Melanie visited once. Just once. Sat across from me during a group session, crossed her legs, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I hope this is your rock bottom, Eric, because it's getting real embarrassing." She smiled the whole time. She told our extended family about it 6 years later. Thanksgiving dinner. Passed the mashed potatoes, then passed that little anecdote right to our Uncle Ron like it was a joke she'd been saving up. Remember when Eric went to rehab? Oh my God, he was so dramatic. Shaved his head and everything. I thought he joined a cult. Everyone laughed. I didn't. I just kept chewing. But I'm not innocent. Let's not pretend I wore white. I stole her diary once. Copied some pages. Used one of them about an affair she had with a guy named Trey in college against her when she got engaged. Slipped a copy of the entry into her fiancé's car. folded it inside a pizza menu. He confronted her. They didn't break up, but the trust never came back. I know that. I saw it in his eyes every Thanksgiving after. That slow, dull distrust. That little seed I planted. Yeah, that was me. Blood on both sides. And then there was the time I told Mom that Melanie was the one who crashed her car in high school, not me. It was true, but I'd kept the secret for 10 years. She begged me not to tell. Said it would ruin her relationship with Mom. I told anyway, during a fight. Got drunk, called Mom, let it slip like it was nothing. She didn't speak to me for months after that. But damn if it didn't feel good in the moment. These weren't just arguments. These were small, deliberate acts of war. All the small deaths, they add up. Each one takes something: trust, dignity, safety, the idea that family means something unshakable. And eventually, you start waking up wondering who you really are under all the bruises and bite marks. Back in high school, Melanie was valedictorian with a GPA of 5.2. Which is wild because back then, the highest GPA possible was like 4.0, right? Maybe I'm remembering that wrong. Or maybe the numbers just never mattered to me the way they did to her. You know, people love to say that's just how siblings are. Like cruelty is part of the package deal, like betrayal is some kind of built-in feature of family. But there's a difference between teasing and tearing someone down until there's nothing left but skin and sarcasm. I think I started building walls back then. Quiet ones. Invisible ones. Melanie thought she could still get to me, still hurt me, still own the script of who I am. But what she didn't realize, what she's never understood, is that silence is not surrender. It's storage. You ever realize you've been cast as the villain in someone else's story for so long, you start wondering if maybe they're right? But then one day, you remember who actually wrote the script. It had been exactly 3 days since the brunch, 3 long days since my sister leaned across the table with her glossy lips and mimosa breath and decided to publicly dismantle what little dignity I had left in front of our mother, her husband, and a bored teenager who probably wasn't listening anyway. And in those 72 hours, Melanie had sent me 12 text messages, each one more desperate than the last, and I read every damn one of them in complete silence, without even twitching my thumb over the reply button. The first one was simple, a brush off, the digital version of a hair toss. Sorry if I came off harsh at brunch. You know how I get when I drink too early. Right, Melanie, I thought to myself, because nothing screams casual misunderstanding like screaming at your little brother that he's a failure while your mother stares into her grapefruit half like it's a portal to another family. The second message was sarcastic, the kind of half apology that doubles as an insult. You really took that seriously? Come on, don't be so sensitive. I've said worse. And that was the moment I realized she still had no idea the game had changed. By message 4, her tone had shifted to defensiveness. She accused me of being dramatic, claimed I was twisting her words, told me I always needed to be the victim. I didn't respond to that one either, just turned off the read receipts and let her sit in that uncertain space between outrage and regret. Message 5 came in a few hours later, and this one was strange. It was short, just 2 words. We good. That one made me laugh out loud, not because it was funny, but because it was so damn on brand for her to think a nuclear-level insult could be smoothed over with a vague question. But message 6, that one had something raw in it, something uncomfortable. She said she hadn't slept well, that she felt off, that maybe things between us had gone unspoken for too long. I thought about responding then. Not with forgiveness or closure, but just to keep the power balance steady. Instead, I let it hang. Let it rot. Let her stew in it. By message 8, she started panicking. She called me twice that day, and when I didn't answer, she sent a wall of text I didn't even bother to read in full, just skimmed through enough to catch words like family, loyalty, and you're being immature. So I did what anyone with a decades-old grudge and a cracked moral compass would do. I started planning. First, I sent our mother a clip from Melanie's baby shower years ago, one I had stored on an old hard drive. buried in a digital junk drawer from when I used to document everything because I thought preserving memories made them matter more. In the video, Melanie is standing in the backyard holding a cupcake, giving some big dramatic speech about motherhood, when suddenly she turns green and throws up in a decorative vase. I clipped it perfectly, ending just as someone screams and the camera shakes. Then I emailed it to Mom with the subject line, "Remember this? LOL. She called me laughing within 10 minutes. Said she'd completely forgotten that happened and how Melanie was always so theatrical. I told her it just popped into my head recently, no reason at all. That was step 1. Then I forgot to send Melanie the Zoom link for our family's monthly catch-up call, which, to be fair, she usually dominates anyway by talking about real estate markets and diet tips no one asked for. I sent it to everyone else. When she texted afterward asking if there was a meeting, I ignored her. Message 9. After that, I posted a Facebook status that wasn't really about her, but absolutely, 100% was. I wrote, "Funny how some people spend their whole lives controlling the story. But the truth always floats to the surface eventually." Within 10 minutes, Melanie liked it. Then unliked it. Then called me again. By the time message 12 came in, her texts had grown shorter, sharper, more erratic. She asked me what I was doing, why I was acting like this, if something happened she didn't remember. She even wrote, "You're scaring me, Eric," which, for her, was like hearing a dictator whisper, "I surrender." It should have satisfied me. Maybe it did. But the strangest part was that I didn't feel like I was winning. Not exactly. What I felt was something else, something closer to awakening. I also ran into Brian at the coffee shop near my store, which wasn't planned, but wasn't exactly random either. I knew he stopped there in the mornings before work. I've always noticed the patterns people think they hide. I waved to him, smiled like everything was normal, and he looked hesitant but came over anyway. We sat down with our drinks, and he asked me how I'd been doing, how the store was, and I could see the questions sitting behind his eyes like kids peeking from behind a curtain. I didn't mention Melanie at all. Not once. We just talked about baseball, overpriced sandwiches, and a comic he used to read in college. It felt good. It felt easy. It felt like something I wasn't supposed to enjoy. That night, she called 4 more times. No voicemails for the first 3. On the 4th, she broke. I listened to it twice. Her voice was small, barely recognizable. She said, "Eric, I'm sorry. I mean it. I don't know what's happening and I feel like you're slipping away. I know I've been awful. I know I hurt you. Please, I'm asking you, just talk to me. Please." I haven't heard her cry since Dad's funeral. I should feel bad. But you know what? I feel alive. The thing about revenge is that it never really feels the way you think it's going to feel, at least, not at first. It doesn't come wrapped in satisfaction or closure or that deep exhale you always imagined. It comes slow and hollow, like an echo bouncing around in a room you used to live in. But even knowing that, even understanding the cost, I kept going because once I started twisting the knife, I realized I finally knew where to aim it. And it felt like power, like finally being the one with the last word. The video was something I found almost by accident while digging through some old backup drives I'd dumped onto a cloud service years ago and forgotten about. I'd been organizing old Comic Con footage for the store's website, trying to look like I was doing something productive while avoiding Melanie's missed calls. That's when I found it. An old home video from Thanksgiving maybe 10 or 11 years ago, back when phones had that grainy flip quality and everyone still thought camcorders were a fun idea. It was taken in the kitchen. You could see Melanie holding a wine glass, leaned up against the fridge, her voice already sharp from a couple of glasses in. Our mom had just stepped out of the frame, probably to check on the turkey, and Melanie muttered loud enough for someone to catch it, "If Mom brings up the damn church group one more time, I'm going to fake a seizure." Then she laughed, loud and cutting, and added, "No wonder Dad used to disappear for hours." I remembered that moment when it happened. I'd been standing there, just out of view, hearing it but pretending not to, tucking it away like all the other things she said when she thought no one was listening. But someone had been listening, and someone had been filming. So I clipped the video down to 10 seconds. Just the essentials. Then I created a fake Facebook account, generic name, no friends, no photo, just a little ghost to stir the water, and posted it in a local group where I knew half our extended family lurked like digital ghouls. I titled it Classic Thanksgiving Humor and let it float. It didn't take long. Mom called me that night crying not just weepy, but that deep, guttural cry you hear when someone's disappointment finally collapses into hurt. She didn't even ask if I'd seen it. Just assumed I had. Said she didn't know Melanie felt that way. Said it was like finding out someone you raised secretly hated you. I told her to take a break from Facebook. I told her maybe people say dumb things they don't mean. But mostly, I just listened and let the silence stretch. Within an hour, our cousin Jenna blocked Melanie on everything. The family group chat went dead. No birthday wishes. No Bible verses. Just digital dust. And I still wasn't done. Because I'd been sitting on the big one. The grenade. The thing I'd copied from Melanie's college diary all those years ago, just in case I ever needed it. Back when I was young enough to think keeping secrets made you clever, not bitter. It was a chain of emails, Melanie and a guy named Trey. He was married. She wasn't. But she knew he was, and that didn't stop her. It lasted 5 months. She ended it when Brian proposed, and she never told him. Until now. I didn't send it from my account, obviously. I used a burner email address, pasted in the screenshots, and wrote, "Thought you should know who you're married to." No name. No explanation. Just enough to shatter the mirror. She must have gotten the email in the morning, because by lunchtime, she stormed into my comic book store like a hurricane in heels, mascara running down her cheeks like war paint, voice hoarse from screaming or crying or both. She shoved the door open so hard the bell cracked against the wall, and the customers, 2 teenage boys and a middle-aged guy browsing the graphic novels, froze mid-step. "You think this is funny?" she screamed, her voice slicing through the stillness like broken glass under a boot. "You think ruining my life is some kind of fucking game?" I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I put down the stack of comics I was shelving and stepped around the counter, calm as a priest before confession. "Melanie," I said, my voice low and measured, "you ruined your own life. I just stopped cleaning up after you." She laughed, wild and empty and frantic, and jabbed her finger into my chest. "You'll always be the failure," she hissed. "Always. You can tear me down, but it won't make you worth anything." And there it was again. The line. The phrase she kept dragging out like a weapon she thought still had an edge. "No," I said, louder this time. Clearer. So everyone in the room could hear me. "I just finally stopped playing your game." She stood there, shaking, her mouth open like she had something else to say, but couldn't get it past the lump in her throat. Then she turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her so hard it rattled the racks of collectibles on the wall. The teenagers looked at me like I was some kind of anti-hero in a movie they didn't understand. The older man walked out quietly, the kind of person who knows better than to get involved in family warfare. I stood there in the silence, hands still, heart steady, and for a second, I thought I felt it, that satisfaction, that payoff I'd been chasing. But it wasn't joy. It wasn't victory. I walked back behind the counter, picked up the comics, started shelving again. But there was something else crawling under my skin, something I couldn't name yet. And it wasn't done with me. Not yet. There's a moment after every battle, after the dust has settled and the smoke has cleared, when you expect a kind of peace to descend, a hush in your mind where the noise finally stops and the ache finally lets go. You think once the final blow is struck, once the scales are balanced or tilted in your favor, something inside you will calm down. But nobody tells you that sometimes the quiet that comes afterward isn't peace, it's just emptiness wearing a mask. That was what I woke up to 3 days after Melanie stormed out of my comic book store, mascara streaked and cracked wide open for everyone to see. It was quiet. That was the first thing I noticed. No calls from Mom asking if I was okay, no texts from Brian asking what the hell had happened, and certainly no more explosive messages from Melanie. The group chat stayed silent. I didn't even get tagged in any Facebook nonsense, which, in our family, basically qualified as an act of war. It was as if everything had just stopped. And for a second, I thought maybe I had one. Her husband moved out. That much I found out from Jenna, our cousin, who still couldn't help gossiping even when pretending to be neutral. Apparently, he packed a bag, left a note, and drove down to stay with his brother in Cincinnati. Melanie called Mom 5 times that same night, and Mom ignored every one of them. Then, for good measure, she posted a Bible verse about pride and downfall on Facebook, which, in our world, was about as subtle as lighting a match in a gas leak. Melanie was scrambling, trying to patch the holes in her kingdom, but the walls were crumbling fast, and I could see every crack from where I was standing. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I'd pictured this moment 1,000 different ways over the years, her crying, apologizing, being exposed for the petty tyrant she'd always been. I thought I'd feel taller, stronger, justified. And for about 5 minutes, I did. Maybe even 10. But after that? After the initial jolt of satisfaction wore off and the adrenaline stopped humming under my skin, all that was left was the question I hadn't prepared myself to face. What now? That's when I got the letter. It came in a plain white envelope, addressed to me in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. I almost didn't open it. I thought about throwing it away without reading a single word, treating it like she'd treated every apology I ever offered, dismissively and with practiced indifference. But something about the weight of it, the idea that she'd chosen ink over screens, made me sit down at the back table in my store and carefully tear it open. There was no greeting, no date, no signature. Just one sentence scrawled across a plain sheet of paper. "You've always been the only person who could destroy me. I just never thought you'd actually do it." I stared at the sentence for a long time, my fingers going numb around the edges of the paper. It didn't come with anger or blame. It didn't accuse or justify. It just sat there heavy, honest, and so much quieter than I'd expected. It didn't even feel like a confession. It felt like surrender. And that hit me harder than anything she'd ever said to my face. Harder than being called a failure. Harder than the years of humiliation, the cold silences, the calculated jabs masked as jokes. Because in that one sentence, Melanie wasn't the villain or the golden child or the queen of condescension. She was just human and broken and maybe scared. I sat there for over an hour holding the letter, staring into the middle distance, thinking about everything I'd done over the last week. I replayed the videos, the fake email, the Facebook post, the ghost account, the strategic silences. I thought about the moment in the shop when she shouted at me in front of customers, her voice cracking like the edge of something final. I thought about all the little ways I'd twisted the knife, slow and deliberate, convincing myself it was justice. And maybe it was. Maybe it really was the first time someone had stood up to her and said, "You don't get to keep doing this." Maybe she needed to be brought down. But even as I sat there convincing myself I was right, there was a part of me, a quieter, harder to ignore part, that kept whispering, "You didn't stop her. You became her." I didn't respond to the letter. I folded it once, slipped it back into the envelope, and tucked it into a drawer under the counter, next to some old receipts and half-dead pens. I didn't want to see it again, but I couldn't throw it away. That felt too final. Like drawing a line I wasn't sure I could live with. She texted again this morning. 12 more messages. Still no response. I read them, of course. Every one. The usual mixture, some sad, some biting, one or two almost poetic in their desperation. I didn't delete them right away. I let them sit there on my screen for a few minutes, glowing in that sterile blue light, asking questions without really asking anything at all. Then I deleted them. One by one. Slowly. I guess silence is the loudest thing I've ever said to her. And it echoes. Every day, it echoes. I sit here in the quiet of my store, surrounded by stories written by other people, each one more complete than my own, and I wonder if this is what closure actually looks like. If it's not a feeling but a place, a waiting room with no doors, just windows looking back at everything you've done and all the people you can't become again. The thing about revenge is, you always think it'll close the book. You imagine it like a final chapter, ink drying on a full stop. But sometimes, it just starts a new chapter. And in this one, I'm not sure who I am anymore.